Dominicans, at home and abroad. From our agriculture and industry to sustainable development, resilience and renewable energy to the music, art, and entertainment industries. Join Dr. Simone Matthew and guests every other Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. We examine where they came from, where they have been, where they are now, and how we can move forward together with our brothers and sisters at home and abroad to inspire and elevate our country, our economy, our people, and our youth to achieve excellence and success. Roots Connections on Q, every other Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Only on Q95, the big station.
Yes, so let me apologize once again. Technical difficulties. For some reason, our Facebook Live and YouTube Live went off prematurely, so we had to create another link. But here we are back with you. We are happy to be joined by the folks on Facebook and YouTube. So important that you be a part of this conversation. So again, I thank you for joining us on Q95 FM radio on Facebook and YouTube, as well as Push Past 10 on Facebook. So what I want to do, I want to jump right into your bios, guys, because I think it is important for us to get to know you just a little bit better. So let's begin with Dr. Gregory Vidal. So it says here on West Cancer Center Research Institute page, Gregory Vidal, MD, PhD. His role is medical oncology, hematology, and he specializes in breast cancer. So about me, it says Gregory Vidal, MD, PhD, is a medical oncologist at West Cancer Center and Regional One Health. He has earned 3 certifications, board certifications, in internal medicine and medicine oncology. Dr. Vidal earned both his medical degree and PhD at Tulane University School of Medicine and holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Science from the University of Mississippi. Following medical school, he completed his residency in internal medicine and a fellowship in hematology and oncology at Stanford University and Clinic, where he served on faculty for a year before moving to Memphis. Dr. Vidal is considered an expert in breast cancer and lectures both nationally and internationally. He is highly sought out for his expertise in drug development and clinical trials. As an associate professor at University of Tennessee Health Sciences Center, he spends a portion of his time on research for breast patients and health inequity issues. He has been honored for his work by several prestigious institutions, including the Cancer Education Consortium, American Association of Cancer Research, and Stanford Society of Physician Scholars. His research is published in renowned professional journals. So that is Dr. Vidal. And we also have with us Dr. D. Malcolm Brewster. And let's see a little bit of his bio. Dr. Devin Malcolm Brewster is a proud son of Portsmouth, Dominica, the youngest of Julian and Junie Brewster's children. His early education journey began at the St. John's Primary School and the Portsmouth Secondary School, eventually leading him to Dominica State College, where he pursued a rigorous triple major associate degree in biology, chemistry, and physics. Driven by a passion for health and science and inspired by his mother, a retired community nurse, he journeyed to Jamaica to attend the University of the West Indies, enrolling in 2017 and graduated in 2022 with an MBBS degree. During his medical studies, Dr. Brewster excelled academically and distinguished himself as a vibrant leader and active contributor to campus life. As president of the MBBS class of 2022, he led over 250 future doctors with integrity and commitment for 5 years. Beyond academics, he lent his voice to the university singers, where he remains a dedicated chorister and found spiritual grounding as part of the Methodist Society. In 2024, Dr. Brewster completed his clinical training at the University Hospital of the West Indies, gaining invaluable experience across primary health, anesthesia, intensive care, and emergency medicine. Now a general practitioner, he is dedicated to private practice at Arden Medical and Premier Multi-Specialty Center in Kingston and the Critical Care Comprehensive Center. He remains committed to elevating primary health care and preventative medicine in Jamaica and beyond through his roles. Dr. Brewster also serves as managing director of Hyper Academics Jamaica, a company he founded as a medical student to support peers in medicine and dentistry academically. He is pursuing a Master's of Public Health at UWI Mona, further reinforcing his commitment to public health and policy. Beyond his professional achievements, Dr. Brewster is a devoted Coke Memorabilia Methodist Church member, serving as the senior organist and an accredited local preacher. His personal interests are as dynamic as his career. He is passionate about politics, current world affairs, and health education, and values time spent hiking, debating, and sharing moments with family and friends. So I think we can all see why in the beginning of the program, I said we are very happy to be joined by two distinguished gentlemen. So, guys, we have a lot to unpack. But one of the purposes of this program for me is that I want this to be a vehicle to motivate our people, especially our young people, because I think we need a lot more role models to give our young people guidance. So, what I want us to do this evening is to kind of walk through your journey to excellence, the challenges you faced along the way, your successes along the way, and what kept you going. Because I think what is important with these conversations is that we kind of find the secret sauce. Why is it, and this is a question my psychology mind always wants to understand, why is it that so many of us face challenges and we stop? And then others of us face even greater challenges, but we continue to pursue. So just share with us some of your experiences, especially the challenges you had to overcome to be where you are today. So Dr. Brewster, let's start with you.
Okay, so first of all, my journey into medicine started with my mother. My mother was diagnosed with a chronic illness while I was very young, and as a very inquisitive child, I would always be under both my parents' arms. You know, whether my mother is going to different areas in the Portsmouth Health District to give talks on public health issues, or my father is fixing his vehicle or something. I'm always under their under their wings. But when my mother got her diagnosis, and she needed further love and tender loving care, I decided to step up. And very young, my mother taught me how to take a blood pressure reading using a manual machine. And as I kept progressing through secondary school and high and college, I never fully knew exactly what I wanted to do. I just eventually knew that it was something to do with the sciences. So I did all the sciences and so forth. And really and truly, what had happened was I decided that, okay, uh, though I'm not too sure what I wanted to specialize in, I'm going to be a doctor. And I remember when I was in third form, a representative from the University of the West Indies, came to the Portsmouth Secondary School, and I learned about the program at the university. And for me, I was never, all excited about the idea of going to study in the United States or in the UK, not because I have any issue with their programs, except that I'm a Caribbean man. I'm a Dominica man and a Caribbean man. And I felt like, perhaps, well, because I always had the intention to, contribute to the development of my country and my region, that, probably it would be best for me to study in the region. And so I did that. But I suppose there was something that happened that really, changed my life, which was where I applied for medical school. And on the day I was supposed to leave Dominica to head to Jamaica, I found out I did not get into medical school. Now, I had gone to Jamaica 2 years prior to teach music as part of a mission trip that with some missionaries that were coming from Oklahoma. So I went there for 3 weeks in May of 2015. And so as I was coming back in 2016 to start medical school, they invited me again to do 2 weeks. And then after that 2 weeks, I would move to Kingston for medical school. But on my day of departure, finding out I did not get into medical school, I was obviously dejected about that. And I went to Savlamar, Jamaica, and I was too depressed to function. And I just finished my program at the Dominica State College, and they said, well, if you want to stay, you can. And I was like, well, I mean, I just finished college, didn't have a job, and, it's just something new, why not? And so they offered me a 10-month contract, and I was able to, teach music and, really engage in meaningful ministry down there. But during that gap year, which I did not want, I was always the one of the people who was like, by such and such an age, I want to do this and do that. And I just wanted to glide through my educational journey nonstop. But I was forced to take a gap year. And during that gap year, I got I have many stories I could tell that really, gave me confidence that, what I was meant to do was medicine, in addition to continuing my music and so forth. And so I'm very grateful for the gap year. And I actually, right now, I'm a proponent of gap years after your associate degree. It helps you to mature and to be better able to navigate tertiary education. And so I reapplied and got in 2017. And it was only just about 2 weeks after starting medical school that Hurricane Maria devastated Dominica. And as you can imagine, in a setting where medical school is very expensive, a lot of uncertainty, scholarships are not certain, etc. With the massive devastation that Hurricane Maria caused, that threw uncertain things into even more uncertain waters. But I was determined that this is what I was meant to do, and I was going to get through by the hook or by the crook. And trust me, Dr. Simone, I worked hard to be able to, first of all, sustain myself and to also raise funds for my medical tuition, which at the time was $23,000 a year for 5 years. And so with the help of many persons in Dominica, in Jamaica, and around the world, I was able to raise those funds by, tapping into my entrepreneurial, I suppose, spirit. I would, at one point, I sold T-shirts, I printed T-shirts, I sold lab coats, I sold dissection kits. If you want it, I either have it or can find it. At one point, yeah, I would go to Miami by my aunt, to collect stock that I ordered to take back to Jamaica to sell. But long story short, I was able to complete successfully in 2022, and it's really because of community. I always tell people, everything that I am and will ever be is because of community. I have been blessed to encounter a lot of great people along my journey, and that has really helped to build my character and to give me a spirit of excellence. And so, yes, that's what I've been trying to do, remain on that path of excellence while also helping others, who have been in my similar shoes to, rise from the ashes of disappointment and turn that disappointment into success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Bruce. And further along in the program, we want to talk about the importance of mentors, the importance of having that support system. Because the way I was introduced to you is when your cousin Elvis sent me the video of you giving a speech to the American Foundation of the University of the West Indies, who had awarded you a scholarship. So I want you to explain to us what you did, because I think many of us, we think within the box. So when we think of pursuing our higher education studies, we might be thinking about getting a student loan. And then if that doesn't happen, then the dream is dead. But and I know Dr. Vidal too has stories about how he was able to get a full scholarship to earn his master's degree. So I want us to help our folks to brainstorm, and even beyond education, whatever goal you're trying to achieve, I want us to be able to brainstorm and think outside the box so that we can continue on that journey, so that we do not let those obstacles put up a stop sign that prevents us from moving forward. So we will talk about that a little while later. But Dr. Vidal, let me come over to you so you can tell us your journey of excellence, your journey to excellence, and the challenges that you faced along the way, and what kept you going. You're muted. Dr. Vidal, you're muted. Oh, we still can't hear you. Why are we not hearing you? Did you change something? I think you may have changed something on your settings, because you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. So while you're trying to figure that out, let's have Dr. Brewster chime in and just tell us about that speech that you gave from the American Foundation for the University of the West Indies. And Dr. Vidal, keep trying, and let's see we can get you back on.
Okay, so how the story goes is that I think it was probably in my second year, first semester of my second year. That was after the university had allowed students from Dominica to continue their studies at the university without paying tuition. Not that they waived the tuition, but they allowed us to continue and defer the payment. And over a year had passed since they granted us that favor, which I'm to this day still very grateful for. And so we came upon first semester of second year, and I was deregistered and unable to sit my exams. I pleaded with the campus to give me a chance. I will find the money, etc. and stuff. But understandably, it's we have to always balance the reality of yes, students needs but the fact that the university also needs money to run. So I never wronged them for deregistering me. But I had exhausted every option at the campus level, and I was so determined that I was not going to go down without a fight. So I took my bicycle and I rode over to the regional office of the University of the West Indies, and I asked to speak with the university registrar, and his name is Dr. Aiton. He was Dr. Aiton at the time, and I was able to get a meeting with him and explain my situation and he empathized with me, and he put me onto the office that deals with scholarships, and they guided me in terms of my application and so on. And so I got a scholarship from the American Foundation for the University of the West Indies, and that would have probably been my first scholarship. It was a drop in the bucket, but it pushed me towards being able to sit my exams. But more than just that, it really gave me my first sense of hope that something which seemed so impossible was possible. And so that's how I got the scholarship. So fast forward 5 years later, after I've graduated, they invited me to New York to speak about my journey to their banquet, their donor banquet, where they seek to get persons to contribute to the various initiatives of the foundation to afford scholarships to students. And so I had the opportunity then to speak about my journey very candidly in about 5 minutes. and my
Yes.
goal was to be as inspiring as I could possibly be.
You really were.
So I tried.
You really were. Dr. Vidal, do we have you back?
Can you hear me?
Fantastic. We are back. So thank you for trying again.
I have no idea what happened.
That's okay. It's technology. Technology is just technology in this evening with us tonight, but that's okay. We're going to push forward. Yeah. So tell us about your challenges. And I think one of the greatest challenges, which is kind of almost a hallmark of the international student's journey into higher education, is when the funding runs out. I think we all have a story of the funding running out, but we not being willing to accept no as an answer. We're not willing to accept it. Going back to Dominica without that degree as an answer. Tell us your story.
So my story is not too unfamiliar. A lot of people who've made the journey to the US have a similar story. Didn't come from much, single family, extended family network. I remember the days when me and my friends, I'll call out Wayne Augustine specifically, were trying to find funds to go to leave Dominica. We even called Money God one day and say, your name is Money God, so maybe you should try to help us out. That wasn't very successful, but happened. And I will call out Dr. Donald Peters, who made it possible to recruit quite a few of us Dominicans to the University of Mississippi, where again, funding was difficult, but we make it happen. I think your first question was, how do you find the motivation to move forward in those struggles when others don't? I think one, you sort of have to surround yourself with the right set of people. I'm reading a book now that I think it's called The Laws of Success, where they talk about sort of the energy that happens when you surround yourself with sort of like-minded people. You can take someone who's not motivated and put them in a room of CEOs, and just that energy sort of motivates them forward. So I have a lot of close friends who've all been successful in that matter. And as long as you have a path forward, we keep on pushing. At school, got a little aid bank loan to finish, but it didn't do everything. We had to work after hours, do the extra to meet. From a master's perspective, the opportunity was there. You get a scholarship, you become a teaching assistant. That allowed to get some funding. My biggest struggle was medical school funding. So with a PhD, if you do a dual degree, you can receive funding, and most of the funding for that is federal. And at the time, federal funding only goes to American students. I was an international student who got accepted into the program, partly because of really good mentors. There was a gentleman by the name of Frank Jones, who actually lives in St. Kitts now, who moved to Tulane at the time that I moved there from Yale to do research. My interest, based on my history with my mom having sort of a liquid cancer and my brother with liquid issues, was to do sort of hematology type stuff. But he was doing breast cancer. And he came in and he sat with me and he gave me this breakdown. He's like, this is how we're going to do this if you come work with me. And it just made sense. I worked with him. We filed for a grant. We got a grant which, no other trainee at the time at Tulane in my area was able to get federal grant, which covered a lot of my salary and things that I needed to do. He also supported me through medical school and making sure that the people at the medical school, my PhD folks who were saying, Greg, you need to spend your time just doing bench work and don't worry about the clinical work, know that I can do both. And so he went all the way out for me. And that's a Caucasian gentleman. And partly because he knew that if he put his hand out there for me, or his head out there for me, that I would accomplish exactly what I set out to. And so not only having really good friends, establishing great mentors, but also showing that you will accomplish the things that you set out to. If people believe that your word, when you say something that you will accomplish it, then they will put themselves out for you. And so I was able to get scholarships And family members help with the rest of the funding through loans and supporting me that way. And eventually was able to get through. The biggest struggle for me was the loss of my mom, which happened right in my third year of undergrad. When I was applying for medical school, I actually applied that year, got into Ross University, and was thinking of going to Ross. I'd gotten accepted, thinking of going back to Dominica when my mom, who lived in New York at the time, passed. And that sort of changed my trajectory and thinking about the need to do research and understand that. And was it not for that, I probably wouldn't be where I am. And so that struggle, that was very hard for me. I mean, I cried months and months. A lot of my friends were not aware, but it was very hard because she was my rock. And because of that, I'm in oncology, and I spend most of my time, well, half of my time, doing research. So those are my struggles, and those are my recommendations for being able to be successful in what you do.
Oh, I'm muted. Yes, so thank you, Dr. Vidal. And we certainly want to explore more about your cancer research because unfortunately, and I know we like to say, well, this is not only in Dominica, but for the purposes of our conversation, we're focusing on Dominica and the Caribbean region. So we know that cancer has been plaguing Dominica for quite a while. Quite a few years. We've had many young women who have succumbed to cancer, breast cancer in particular. So I want us to explore that a little bit more in depth. But before we do, let me go over to Dr. Brewster. And you are practicing in the Caribbean. And I think you can shed some light with us with regards to the non-communicable diseases. So let's now explore those medical challenges that we see in the Caribbean region. So we know there's an increasing rate of non-communicable diseases. Here in the US, we call them lifestyle diseases. So we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about obesity, we're talking about hypertension. So tell us what you are seeing in your practice in Jamaica.
Okay, so first of all, the terminology that the Pan American Health Organization would usually utilize to refer to these conditions are chronic non-communicable diseases. And the Caribbean and Latin America is known to be one of the centers of chronic non-communicable diseases in the world. And that has to do largely with the high concentration of persons of African descent. Many of these conditions, there's genetic predisposition to them in persons of African descent. So when you add that to our westernized diet, sedentary lifestyle, it is a nidus for the formation of, or the development rather, of a host of chronic non-communicable diseases, such as diabetes mellitus, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, obesity. And I gave a presentation, just 2 days ago, and I referred to it as a cycle of doom, right? Not necessarily with the intention to instill fear, but rather to drive home the point that these chronic non-communicable diseases are so weirdly interconnected that almost each of them is a risk factor for another. And so your development of one increases your risk for the development of many others. And so someone who is diagnosed with diabetes is at increased risk for development of hypertension. And those individually both have significant risk for heart disease, stroke, etc. So you can imagine that the risk is perhaps even more additive when you put the two of them together. And you add to the fact that a lot of persons with these chronic illnesses tend to also be obese, which is a risk factor for each of them. And again, a cycle of doom. And so it behooves us, therefore, to understand the risk that we face innately as persons in the Caribbean and mostly of African descent. But the truth of the matter is that we are also blessed. We are blessed with relative peace. Very, very few people can, speak of a reality in the Caribbean where they are fearful to walk outside. We have sunshine most of the year. And most of us, have no problems walking in the rain either. So we really have no excuse to not be as active, whether it be in walking, whether it be in swimming, whether it be in climbing mango tree, whether it be climbing coconut tree, whether it be going to the river, all these sort of things that, the older generation, likes to talk about, they had a good childhood. I mean, I believe that perhaps my generation is the last generation that had this very outdoorsy experience, right? You find that children are not necessarily as interested in those things anymore. But we also have to, reconcile with the changing times. It's just not as safe as it was 10, 15 years ago. I'm just 26, so we cannot really be talking about that far back. But yes, we have a problem in the Caribbean. But the thing about it is that with these chronic non-communicable diseases, they are largely within the control of us as people to prevent, and if we are diagnosed with them, to control. And so it's really about getting the messaging correct, and increasing access to healthcare, changing the culture to encourage persons to do more wellness visits. There's the idea that you only go to the doctor when you're sick, something is hurting you, something feels off. No, you should go to the doctor at least once a year for a wellness checkup, do your executive profile, and you're never too young and definitely never too old. And as you alluded to earlier, Dr. Simone, we're seeing where persons are being diagnosed with these chronic non-communicable diseases at younger ages. The youngest patient I've seen with hypertension is 16 years old.
Wow.
16, right? So if it is and it was an incidental finding, right? If they had not been in a vehicular accident, they probably would never feel the prompt to just randomly go to a doctor. And all this time, this hypertension would get worse, and then complications would ensue. And oftentimes, what we find, because of poor health-seeking behaviors, persons are diagnosed with these preventable and treatable and controllable diseases when they have already developed advanced complications. And so we really need to increase the awareness among our population so that we can get early detection, because early detection saves lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we will also talk about prevention as well as the advancements now to treat many of the diseases that you're referring to. But let me go back to you, Dr. Vidal, because I know that you are one of the top medical oncologists and clinical research specialists in the US. So you have so many accomplishments, but you mentioned one also before we logged off. You started saying an award that you had won, and I don't want it to go unnoticed. Can you remind us what that was?
Yeah, which was a surprise to me. The Healthcare Hero Award in my area, essentially the top position, which was given by the Memphis Business Journal. But to comment a little bit about what Dr. Brewster was saying, so very important. I mean, all of what he said, and I don't want to just glance over this. We, in the US, we're a developed country. And for most part, the US medical system is built more on a reactive type of medicine, where you get diagnosed and we have the best test to treat you. But in the Caribbean countries, in low-income countries, preventative approach is really sort of the best way, and that should be adopted by developed countries also. But it's even more important. The connection between diabetes, heart disease, poor immune system, and the development of cancer. The fact that we are not as active as we used to be is absolutely important and dead set. And even our diet and activity, alcohol use. In my business of breast cancer, alcohol is a risk factor for development of breast cancer, for example, and obesity for it also. So those sort of things are very, very important, and we need to pay particular attention, partly because, one, it's also a cost on the system. And because of our limited resources, when you get diagnosed, you may not be able to get the best treatment for that cure, to obtain that cure that we get in developed countries. So let's try not to get to that endpoint of diagnosis.
Yeah, and I also wanted to explore your work in cancer, Dr. Vidal, because I know some of the research that you're doing is on new ways to test for breast cancer, new drugs for breast cancer. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit more. And also, when we started the conversation, you said something that I think is so important, the tailored approach to treating the patient. So this cannot be a one size fits all, because as you mentioned before we logged off on the first program, the fact that we were treating people of different races and ethnicities in the same way, but then we were having different outcomes. So let's explore that a little bit more, because I think that is so important and something many of us may not have ever heard before.
Yeah. So to take your first part of your question, I get really excited when you ask me those things. Is that right now in oncology, we've moved from a one-size-fits-all into what we call more precision approach, where a patient who presents with a cancer, be it breast cancer, that looks similar to her neighbor's, where we can take her tumor, sequence it, figure out what's actually specific about this tumor and tailor her approach to this. But on the second part of your question, what we've recognized is that there are many other factors that influence the actual outcome. And the most important is that cure, the outcome of that disease. Okay, so how do we get to that point? For patients of color in my area, for example, Memphis, they're more likely to be socio disadvantaged. There are many factors like access to care that would impact how advanced the breast cancer is when they come in. Patients of color, for example, are more likely to get a type of breast cancer called triple negative breast cancer, which is more aggressive. There's some environmental impact for it, but most of it is biology. When we go back to West Africa, where most of the slaves come in, we do see a high proportion of triple negative breast cancer in this population. So there's biology. But the issue is it's aggressive. So if you have any sort of lax in trying to get the treatment, the diagnosis early, you tend to present with later age. So then therefore that impacts your survival. But more than anything else, what my research is showing is that even for patients who present early of color, who utilize tools that are approved, modern technology, for example, to treat breast cancer patients, that when you use that tool on a Caucasian patient, it better predicts the outcome, the treatment profile, than a patient of color. Why is that so? Partly because most of those tools are not validated in patients of color. Why? Because patients of color don't participate in clinical research. It's a taboo. We don't want to be used as guinea pigs. And we hear this all the time without recognizing that the laws, we do recognize that many things were done against patients of color historically that were wrong in the clinical research realm. But because of that, there's many changes that have happened in clinical research that protects every single patient, not only from the federal government, from the local, from the institution, that really the chance of you being taken advantage of on a clinical trial is very low. But more than anything else, I want to finish that thought, is that the drugs that you use to get treated with when you get diagnosed were not tested on patients like you, because when the drugs were being developed, you chose not to participate in clinical trial. So I can't tell for sure whether or not the anthracycline chemotherapy that I'm giving works as well in you as it does in a Caucasian patient, because only 5% of patients who participate in clinical trial are Caucasian patients. And we're finding now that when we look at the outcome for everyday use of tests that we do in our patients, that our patients of color, it's not predicting exactly as it should in Caucasian patients. So that's another thing that I do. And when I interview and I talk and I do my research around is how do we get patients of color to participate in clinical trial? How do we reduce that guard so that they understand that it's just as important to participate as it is to use the drug at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating information, Dr. Vidal, and you're so correct, because I've even heard of a very simple example where this applies. So someone was telling me that even the hand sanitizer dispensers, there has been research to show that some may not respond as well to someone of the Black race because it was tested on only Caucasians. So a simple idea like that can have implication, much less the advanced studies that you're talking about. So I want to figure out how can we get past that resistance to being a part of these clinical trials, because most of us will know that the fear of these clinical trials come from the Tuskegee study, where the disease syphilis was allowed to pretty much work its course through, I think it was men in the military, if I'm remembering correctly. And from that, African Americans have been petrified about clinical testing. So Dr. Vidal, how do we push past that? Because we saw the implications of this even during COVID-19. And Dr. Brewster, I'm coming to you because I wanted to talk about how we are addressing the diseases that we're seeing. Have there been any advancements in the way we are treating the lifestyle diseases we're finding in the Caribbean? So I want you to talk on that when we come to you, Dr. Brewster. But Dr. Vidal, how do we get over that hurdle? Because as we can see, it has implications in almost every aspect of medicine.
Yes. So this is historical, and it's going to take a movement to really move this further. But we're on our way there. One is education. Understanding. It takes me longer to convince a patient of color to go on a trial than it is a Caucasian patient.
Yeah.
Because one, we talk about the historical issues that happen, and so the bias is there. But understanding also what we're talking about. So you have to educate patients about what is a clinical trial. So we've developed a whole platform of videos with one of the pharmaceutical companies just tailored at what is a clinical trial and how you protect it in clinical trial. Because of the very Tuskegee project that you talk about, there were federal mandates that tells us how we should conduct a clinical trial, that the NIH has to look at it and approve it, make sure that nobody is disadvantaged, that there is an independent review board called the IRB that is made up of people in the community who review every research, that even me as a physician, before I put a patient on study, I have to follow strict guidelines, and then monitors come in and monitor the trials throughout. The FDA comes in and asks me that pharmaceutical companies themselves cannot conduct research. That's why people like me do it. They develop the drugs, they have to send it out because they're biased. So there's education. So we have to overcome the biases. There is also issues with access. Patients of color tend to get, and I just published an article in lung cancer of all things, partly because that's where the data set was, that patients of color get their treatment in community practices that they themselves don't participate in research. And so the smaller practices, because those are the practices that's in the neighborhood that's smaller, those physicians themselves don't generally participate in research. And those are the physicians who don't do as much of continued medical education like other physicians. And so there's a disadvantage too. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is go to those practices and make sure that they are themselves educated and have access. So there are a number of different things that goes on as to why. But since COVID, one of the things that happened as a result of COVID is the realization that there was a group of people who were doing worse than others, and that was the patients of color. And why is that? And because of that, there has been really not microscope, but people come in to me now and come in to other folks like myself. The FDA is now mandating that every clinical trial, for your drug to be approved, you must have enough patients that of color in order for them to approve it. Your drug, your trial must represent the people who are going to use it. And so because of that, now pharmaceutical companies are coming in and trying to pay people like me to understand what's going on in the community. How do we educate the community? How do we move trials along? And I think I'm very optimistic about where we're going to be because there is really more visibility with this.
Yeah, and Dr. Vidal, you're absolutely correct. And I want to thank you for enlightening us on with this information, because I have to give you an example where we need to see more minority physicians like you and Dr. Brewster, especially with regards to getting over that resistance to clinical trials, because my friend, Dr. Tabitha Andre, talks about it all the time. She's an OBGYN. Of course, you would know Tabitha because we're all from the same Civicol class. But she talks about it all the time, that there are women of color who will travel 2 hours to come to Virginia to see her simply because she's Black. And they can identify with her. So one of the reasons we keep doing these programs is because we want to encourage more people who look like us to get into medicine. When you hear the statistics that the percentage of Black female physician is 1%. That speaks volumes that there's a need for change. But Dr. Brewster, you have anything you would like to contribute? And also let's go into some of the advances we may be seeing in the way that we are treating non-communicable, chronic non-communicable diseases in the Caribbean.
Okay, so first of all, in terms of the treatment of chronic non-communicable diseases, the first approach that is recommended and should always be attempted is lifestyle modification, right? So a physician should never be too quick to start medication if it's not absolutely necessary. My approach as a general physician is I want my patients to be on as little medication as possible. And even when we step up the medication because of increasing severity, the goal is to eventually step it back down. But that can only be achieved with lifestyle modification. And so I think the first advancement that I want to touch on is not any novel device or some kind of revolutionary medication. It's really the advancement in media, right? In 2024, there are so many means through which we can reach people via social media, via print media, via digital media that did not exist 25 years ago. And so it therefore requires our policy directorate and our physician or advocacy groups and associations, and so to make use of the various means through which we can reach the population in a language that and in a medium and in a method that they can understand. I think that is the greatest weapon that we have against chronic non-communicable diseases, being able to meet people where they are, literally on their phones, on their screens, that we didn't have before. We no longer need to wait for patients to come to us for education, because history has shown us that in the Caribbean we have very poor health-seeking behaviors, and so we can go directly to them. But beyond just that, advancement in the treatment of chronic non-communicable diseases, it's very, very broad, and we obviously cannot touch on all of them tonight. But we can think about things like genetic testing that allows us to be able to look specifically at the genetic makeup of patients individually or in groups, whether it be from a particular community or persons in a particular profession with known specific exposures and so forth. and be able to target treatment directly for the individual and increase the chance of success and reduce mortality and morbidity. So there's genetic testing. But there's also technology that include, for example, continuous glucose monitoring. You can essentially have a device that is just connected to your skin, usually on the shoulder, that is able to give you your blood sugar reading at any given point. And it can even go beyond where in situations where persons have, for example, type 1 diabetes, where they're not producing insulin, to basically have an external pancreas, a little dot, maybe just about an inch and a half, a device that is on your shoulder that is continuously giving insulin in a manner that responds to whatever your glucose reading is at the moment, which is basically how your pancreas would ordinarily function. That technology is available and accessible. We have other things such as digital health platforms and telemedicine. There are some conditions for which telemedicine would suffice for assessment and treatment, right? So in more low risk diseases, or for example, you wake up with a fever and a sore throat, and we learned the value of that a lot in the pandemic when people were, afraid to come out. A medical professional can sit on their computer basically anywhere in the world. Obviously once they have, license to practice in the jurisdiction that the patient is, that they're able to, send prescriptions and so forth. And via the phone or the computer, elicit a detailed history that can give sufficient information for the physician to make a diagnosis wherever they are and send a prescription to a pharmacy, and a patient can just go collect. When we think of this, the reality in Dominica, where a lot of where healthcare through the primary healthcare system is decentralized at the primary level, but at the secondary and tertiary level, it is very much centralized. And given our topography, given our culture, whereby very early in the night, everyone's in their beds, so there's not public transportation, 24/7. We can really benefit from normalizing and popularizing telemedicine for low risk assessment and initiation of treatment of patients, etc. We can go further to speak about robotics that allow physicians, surgeons to be able to do surgeries from miles away, across in a different continent with precision that is virtually unparalleled. Right now, one of the things I always caution persons about when we speak about advancement in medicine is that, and we could have a whole segment, a whole session on AI and the applications of AI in healthcare. That could be a whole session on its own. But even as we advance in technology, we have to always remember, however, that technology is not perfect. And no matter how advanced we will ever get, it will never ever be perfect. And so it still requires healthcare professionals who have good clinical acumen and judgment, great critical thinking skills, to be able to solve problems and to be able to use these technologies not to replace your innate ability to elicit a history and to examine and to assess and to come up with a treatment plan, but to basically use these technologies as an adjunct. So for example, you have a huge data set from an electronic health record system that you can use AI to help analyze this huge data set. But, and I'm sure Dr. Vidal would agree with me as a research man, you cannot take an output from an AI generated analysis and simply publish that as your own, because you still need a mind to be able to look through and to sift through some of the gibberish that AI can produce from time to time. But the thing about it, they didn't hide to tell us, it's artificial intelligence. It is artificial, and therefore it requires us to actually, use it as an adjunct and not as a replacement. And I think, yes, it requires a lot of investment. It requires a lot of strategic planning, but it is possible, and it is the direction that the world is moving. And if, as a country, we are, serious about our development, wanting to make our impact on the global scale, wanting to afford the ordinary man the best quality healthcare, then we cannot run away from these advancements, and we have to put things in place to make the necessary investment to increase the access of our people to these technologies to advance their healthcare.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your insights, Dr. Brewster. Very well said. And Dr. Vidal, I want to come to you to get your thoughts on some of what Dr. Brewster mentioned, but just to make sure our audience is clear on what we are talking about. So you mentioned AI, which is, we know, is artificial intelligence. But when we speak of telemedicine, what we are talking about is in the same way that you can communicate with your friends via maybe WhatsApp video chat or through a Zoom call. The technology now exists through video conferencing that you can also connect with your doctor. So Dr. Vidal, I want your thoughts on what Dr. Brewster mentioned. So telemedicine, the role of media. We have all these wonderful influencers out there promoting product. Why not use them to promote preventative care, such as breast screening, which we know is the number one way to prevent a diagnosis of breast cancer? What about AI? What about robotics? So I want your thoughts on this. And then, Lambi, I want to come over to you to the studio. So let Dr. Vidal respond first, and then we will come over to you for the calls. And then we want to take the conversation locally with our doctors. So we want to look at Dominica in particular and some of what is plaguing Dominica. I hope that you guys have keeping in touch, keeping on top of everything that goes on in Dominica, especially as it refers to the challenges that many people talk about with the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. And what are your recommendations that you may offer, considering that you're both distinguished physician? So Dr. Vidal, your thoughts on the advancements in medicine?
So thanks for that. Very good summary. Well,
yes,
more than a summary, but very broad approach to technology. We've been using, I did today, virtual approach to medicine, telemedicine on some of my patients. This really blossomed during COVID, partly because people were stuck in their homes. And so some of the institutions went fully virtual, where you would see a patient through the screen and have a conversation and then get diagnosed. The limitations previously had been that you couldn't get paid for it. So Medicare, Medicaid couldn't get paid for it, but because of the emergency of COVID, there was payment that was made possible for those types of visits, and therefore it blossomed. I was recently on the Hill advocating for the renewal of these payments because come December they're expiring, and the Senate and the Hill have been stopped. We'll see what happens in the lame duck sessions. So that's absolutely important because we reached patients who live far in rural areas, who can't travel as much. We reach folks who couldn't leave their home because they have some form of comorbidity that limited that. And it's very, very helpful, but everything has its limitations. All right, you can't do a physical exam. We at West Cancer Center, we have about 70 to 80% of the market of all oncology within my region. We see almost 18,000 new patients a year. We've just started doing 3D virtual clinics. So in our rural centers, we have 12 different satellite clinics. We can have a 3D rendering of the physician who's sitting here in our clinic to the rural area and have a conversation like I'm sitting in the room. And we're the first practice to do that. And so that's further technology. I do want to go talk about a few other things like AI. Artificial intelligence is going to change the way we practice everything. I'm going to speak specifically about medicine. We know it cannot replace a human being. We tried this before. There was IBM Watson, where there were many studies that look at whether or not IBM Watson could at least be as good as a physician in making a diagnosis and treating a patient. That large study, that turned out to be a dud, because what artificial intelligence cannot do is if it's predicting a pathway very well, but when there are changes, that is where artificial intelligence falls through. Artificial intelligence, we're actually in our center are in talks to utilize that more in research. It is a very important tool that you can utilize to enhance the efficiency of how you function as an institution, even in research, or even for, in our experience, even lower your cost of doing work, because artificial intelligence can do it, but it cannot replace a human being. But as they get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, they will scare us, because they will do many things like human beings, and we do have to think about regulations around those. But these are things that are coming in the future. In fact, not in the future, they're here now. We're just trying to figure out how to utilize them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So let's go over to the studio, and then I want to come back to you for your recommendations for healthcare in Dominica. Anything you would like to share as we look at the concerns that many Dominicans express on a daily basis? Just your recommendations, your thoughts on how we can improve healthcare in Dominica in general. So Lambi, let's come over to you. Everyone on Facebook and YouTube, keep the comments coming. I see them, and I am coming over to you in just a minute. Lambi?
You're listening and or viewing Roots Connection and Q. The numbers to contact us are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. All those are local numbers. The international number is 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers one more time. 449-3095, 3096, 3097, 616-4257, all local numbers. The international number, 305-432-9624. Back to you, Simone.
Yes, thank you. So just a reminder that we are here with Dr. Gregory A. Vidal, who is a partner at West Cancer Center and Research Institute, among many other roles that he holds, as well as Dr. D. Malcolm Brewster, a general practitioner of Arden Medical and Critical Care Comprehensive Center in Jamaica. So again, we're talking about the advancements in medicines and the implications for Dominica and the Caribbean region. So let's take a few comments from Facebook. And Neil Coffey, I'm listening to a very impressive program. Sharon St. Clair, great leaders, listening, bro. Elvis Pappy Edwards, does he sound familiar, Dr. Brewster? He says 100%. Sharon St. Clair, so right, surrounding yourself with positive people. And then we have TZ LaRose, proud of you, Dr. Brewster. Alexia, Etienne, way to go, Dr. Greg, impressive start. Irma Lloyd, blessed evening to everyone, Dr. Vidal. She also say is stress also a major contributor to cancer, hypertension, and diabetes? Thoughts? Stress as a factor? Guys?
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry.
That was the question to you all. Stress as a factor.
Yes. The answer is yes. It is very difficult to conduct studies that shows sort of a direct link. But we do know things like stress can impact one's immune system. And the immune system, as we're learning more and more, is absolutely very important for in terms of being able to fight disease, prevent diseases, especially in cancer. We now have drugs that all it does is boost your immune system, and they're curing cancer. And so therefore, we do know things like stress. And there are other studies that I can't really cite right now that will tell you that stress has a significant impact on one's ability to actually deal with disease, but also increase your risk of having things like diabetes, cancer. Well, diabetes has more of a direct role, but those sort of things, there are lots of diseases that are directly related to it.
Dr. Brewster?
Well, totally agree. I mean, between the two of us, we have a cancer specialist in the house. So I definitely agree with him. And as you said, while it is difficult and has been difficult to establish direct links between stress and cancer, there's enough evidence of links between stress and other things that increases your risk to cancer. And so by deductive reasoning, it stands to reason that there must be some, at minimum, association, because as we know, association does not necessarily mean causation. But overall, stress has a known impact on our health. The stress response being sustained for much longer. Our stress response is intended naturally to protect us, right? So our stress response is supposed to be short-lived to get us out of whatever is the imminent danger and get back to normalcy. Sustained stress response is not safe for the body in general. And so even remember, well, let me not say remember, the definition of health by the World Health Organization is the complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. And it is such that if it is that, you might be doing pretty well socially, but physically and mentally it's off, it's going to tip off the balance. And the same can be said about any aspect of that equation. The only way you can attain true health and wellness is to seek to strike a balance between these three parameters.
Yes, thank you so much.
I want to add to that.
Yes.
The difficulty is determining exactly how much stress is harmful and what type of stress is harmful, and determining whether or not changing stress will have an impact on your outcome for a disease. And we don't have those direct measurements. But again, as was very well stated, striking that balance is absolutely important.
Yeah, and also recognizing the difference between positive and negative stress. So we can have a whole program on stress, because we know positive stress is the stress that comes from if you're preparing for an exam. That's positive stress. Negative stress might be you've lost your job and now you're trying to figure out how you're going to take care of your family. So we can have a whole program on that. So Emma, I hope you got the answer to that question. Veronica, Pascal, good evening, everyone. My friend Liz out there in Massachusetts, she says, amazing. Thank you, young men, for your advocacy and for all your work in research and awareness. Knowledge is power. And when we know better, we do better. Thank you for educating us. Ambrose Blanc says, would that be the HIPAA laws that you're referring to? Yes, we were talking about research and testing on subjects. So that is covered by HIPAA. And he also says patients of color need to be educated about research and the protection that currently exists to protect them. And he continues by saying, yes, I did get an offer for research in medication for high cholesterol. Simon Peak, you go, Dr. Brewster. Ambrose also says, how would you address a situation where a patient does not have access to a screen? So that's kind of looking into some of the challenges we see in Dominica, because we know there are challenges in patients getting screening sometimes. And then we have Shuma Vidal. Thanks for such information. listening intently. Yes, so taking the conversation back to local. So, what would be your recommendations based on what you may have heard? We cannot go through the number of complaints that we hear coming out from Dominica, but just kind of based on what you've heard coming out of Dominica, what would be your recommendation as physicians in terms of maybe improvements we need in the healthcare system in Dominica, in the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, and the complaints we hear coming out of that institution? So, Dr. Vidal, let's go with you first.
Yeah, so thank you. I will make my statement by saying things in Dominica, it can become so very political. This is not intended to be political at all. We are a low income, low resourced country, and I have to want people, when they think about what's happening in Dominica, to also think about what we're comparing it to. Okay, we can compare Dominica's system to a system in the U.S., but we can compare it to other systems within the Caribbean. And are they lacking? I think the thing that is, in my opinion, and I can't comment on any direct situation, because what we see on social media or here, there's always a second side to it. I'm a Dominican. I know Dominicans always are able to juice things up. I think what I'm involved in. I try to be involved in what's happening, especially from an oncology perspective. I send drugs down. I speak to patients. I speak to physicians down in Dominica and help manage patients. Some of whom you commented on today. I think what overall I think is lacking is continued medical education, a really good continual medical education system. In my business, which I'm on the forefront of development of drugs, treatments, diagnosis, it's changing so quickly that if you don't follow it and stay up with it, that you're falling behind and you're treating people like they are in 1970s. But also, I've also realized I'm one of the owners in the practice here and one of the leaders of the practice. We have almost 100 practitioners. I also recognize that if you're not on top of them to do this, to continue the medical education, they're going to leave it behind. And so you need to have a system where physicians are able to get the necessary education in order to treat the population. And I don't think that system exists at the way it should in Dominica. And this is really my major comment regarding what's going on.
Thank you for that. And I also want to talk to you because I know you're also involved with the Cancer Society in Dominica. So we'll explore that in just a minute. You know, we have so much to talk about, and I'm really disappointed we had that hiccup in the beginning of the program because 2 hours goes by so very quickly when you have important things to talk about. So Dr. Brewster, your recommendations for Dominica.
Okay, I would want to preface it with a little context, right? In 1978, there was what is known as the Alma Ata Declaration, which basically gave birth to primary health care as we know it. And oftentimes we speak about all the negative things and highlight the negative things about Dominica, which in one sense is not necessarily a bad thing, because within a democracy you have to have the freedom and also the maturity of your population and electorate to be able to speak candidly about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I think there's no doubt about the fact that we don't spend enough time speaking about how much Dominica is a big deal. Because what happened is that, as I'm sure many of you would remember, I was probably just an element in the universe at the time. But in 1978, we had Hurricane David. And by the way, I'm recounting directly from the mouth of a very notable Dominican, Dr. Carissa Etienne of blessed memory, who rose to prominence as director of the Pan American Health Organization. I had the honor, I think it might have been last year or 2 years ago, to have sat in an audience where she was just reflecting on her journey, and she shared about the role of Dominica in, the development of the primary healthcare model that is used internationally. Because with the advent of Hurricane David, where everything basically needed to be built back from the ground up, the healthcare system underwent that sort of revolution with the introduction of primary healthcare, and Dominica was utilized as basically the gold standard for primary healthcare in the entire world. I think it is very clear that over the years, we have been experiencing some gaps in the primary healthcare system. The primary healthcare system is supposed to be the first gateway into the healthcare system. The idea is that if it is the primary healthcare system is supposed to function as a foundation of the entire healthcare system, and if it is that there is any shakiness in the foundation, and in our context of this conversation being the healthcare system, if there is any fault at the primary healthcare level, we're going to end up with issues at the tertiary level. And so my recommendation really is that as a country, we seek to, one, return to where we were in terms of the strength of our primary healthcare system. But when we talk about returning, we have to always be careful, because in 1978, we did not have all of the advancement in technologies that we're talking about in this program. So we return in terms of spirit, in terms of will, and in terms of determination, in terms of prioritizing the system by making investments and so forth. But we have to embrace the technology and the new knowledge, the research that we have access to strengthen our primary healthcare system, increase access to healthcare at the primary level. Now, we are on a good trajectory. I've noticed that the government is focusing on expanding, opening new health centers, or improving health center facilities around the country. But we need to take it a step further. We need to actually make investment in employing more healthcare professionals, more specialists. We have a shortage of specialists in Dominica, and so we have specialists who are stretched. For the ideal delivery of healthcare, there has to be a proper ratio between the healthcare professionals available and the population that it serves. I cannot quote the exact ratio for Dominica at this point, except to say that from anecdotal data, we definitely need more healthcare professionals in Dominica. And we're not just talking about doctors. We're talking about nurses. We're talking about physiotherapists. We're talking about specialists within these different healthcare service providers. We definitely need more, so that the greater number of the amount of the population can be served by these persons. And then to really target the cultural factors that influence people's aversion to seeking help, that influences people's compliance with their medication. Because when you really think of it, very few persons can use lack of knowledge as the basis for their health-seeking behaviors. Because, as mentioned before, with the advent of media, health is in our faces. Most often you find, and from my experience, when I deal with patients in my office, when I deal with patients at the health centers when I work, and I seek to interrogate, why don't you take your medication? They refer to beliefs that the medication is not good for them, or that taking one medication means that they're going to eventually need more and they will never ever stop taking medications and so forth. Belief that the bush tea is going to work better than the pill. Believing that they can pray their illnesses away. And the approach really has to be, one, to understand where they're coming from, and in some cases we can actually legitimize these beliefs, because if I would be lying if I sit and say to you that, there aren't herbs that can help with your hypertension and help with your diabetes, or there are not herbal medications that can help, change your cancer outcome and extend your life and help, reduce morbidity. I would be lying if I said that those didn't exist. But again, it goes back to balance, right? And so it goes back again to what Dr. Vidal mentioned: continued medical education. We cannot have healthcare professionals who are insistent only on whatever is in the textbook. You have to broaden your knowledge base, broaden your horizon. If it is that you're working in a setting where people have a greater inclination to resort to herbal medication, the basilic tea and the lemongrass and all this kind of stuff, then it is incumbent on our healthcare professionals to understand how we can include lemongrass and include basilic tea in the algorithm, in the treatment plan, that would help, result in better outcome. So education of our healthcare professionals definitely cannot be understated. And of course, education of the population, and the education has to be continuous, because the world, the medical industry is rapidly changing. We're talking about day by day, week by week, and month by month.
Yes,
Yeah.
and ladies and gentlemen, that is 26, right? 26-year-old Dr. Brewster. So imagine what his potential is as he continues to grow and develop. And I was going to end the program with this question, but I think it is appropriate now. And the question we have to continue to ask ourselves in Dominica is, how are we going to engage with the Dr. Brewsters of the world, the Dr. Vidals of the world? How are we creating that enabling environment in Dominica to allow Dr. Brewster, Dr. Vidal, and the hundreds and thousands of other Dominican professionals to make a meaningful contribution to Dominica, to impact Dominica, because we know and we can see and we can hear that they are certainly making a tremendous impact in the world, in the region, in the countries where they are currently located. And it is a loss for Dominica if we do not take the opportunities, we do not create the avenues for the Dr. Brewsters, the Dr. Vidals of the world, and the hundreds and thousands of other Dominican professionals. So at this point, I just want to thank Q95 and Mr. G and Lambie and Showin and everyone who makes this program possible, because we can see why it is so important to engage with Dr. Brewster, Dr. Vidal, and all the other contributors we've had to this program. So I hope I said that well. Dr. Vidal, let me come over to you, because I know that you've been making a contribution to the Dominica Cancer Society. And let me just thank Emo News, because that is actually where I looked at your interview, and she did a fantastic job of interviewing you back, I believe, in December of 2023 when you were on vacation. So we're running out of time, so we don't have the time to talk about the importance of self-care, but you did a very good job of talking about the importance to also take care of yourself as you're pursuing your goals and your ambitions. So one of the things you talked about is knowledge donation, that you're donating your knowledge to the Dominica Cancer Society. I also think you talked about that there were 3 nurses who came up for training. So just kind of tell us about the work that you're doing with the Dominica Cancer Society.
So all in all, we do, we don't blast it as much, and maybe we should. A group of us, mainly PSS alumni, get together, and we started a nonprofit. It's called 2K Ahoya. And that nonprofit, there's a link with Dr. Brewster, because one of the things that we did every year with Curtis Langley, one of my good friends, has been sort of the forefront of that, is sponsoring graduation of all the schools in Portsmouth, especially Portsmouth Secondary School. And I remember the year Dr. Brewster graduated, he took all the prizes. at
Oh,
PSS.
not all. But fun fact, I was the student of the year, and the sponsor of the award for student of the year was none other than Dr. Vidal.
So,
Wow.
so we have that connection. So one of the things that we did, it first started as sort of trying to mobilize the youth in the community. When disaster happened, we changed to also include disaster relief. And so for Erica and Maria, we raised significant amount of funds, did a lot of healthcare. Um, but we also do work with the Dominica Cancer Society. We've donated drugs. We've donated time, effort to Dominica because it is something. Dominica's given me a lot. As Dr. Brewster says, I will always be from Portsmouth. I'll always be Guatas. I will always be Dominican. I was Dominican before I was anything else. And it really does hurt my heart when you started talking about we being outside of Dominica because I feel so connected to Dominica. I come to Dominica 4 or 5 times a year. I feel so connected to the country, and it's very sad that I am really most of my efforts are over here in the US and treating those patients. They need me, but they also need me in Dominica. Part of the issue is when we go back to also what things that I think needs to be changed is the way we pay for healthcare in Dominica, especially tertiary education. We need to have a more centralized way. With all of the islands in the Caribbean who are suffering the same sort of issues with having to need all of this out-of-pocket costs for somebody who needs a tertiary, have a broken leg that needs to go to Martinique, for example, and you have to go to government to do that. We should be able to mobilize all of those countries together to form sort of an insurance-based agency where you have specialized treatments in different Caribbean countries, Dominica, oncology, Lucia, infectious disease, and where we are able to sort of together treat those patients and raise the level of care, because coming out of pocket and going to government for those things, that's not going to work. That's not sustainable. And that's part of the reasons why physicians who get trained outside, who are really doing well financially, to be honest with you, it's difficult to sort of leave that and come down to Dominica. It always is a donation of time. And when you're donating your time, the first thing to get cut off when things get stressful is that donation. And so then you find people pulling away. So we need to really figure out a way to sort of, one, make it at least financially feasible for people to come back and do those practices, but also, a centralized way. The DAAS, I think you were involved in that. I don't know what happened to it. But there also needs to be a way where we can bring experts together. And when there's a question and a need from Dominica, we go to the experts, be it Dominicans or abroad, and get an opinion on how we could solve things. And so that needs to also be done.
Yeah, fantastic. So I really want to thank you guys for being here. And I think we have to go back because we talked about the importance of lifestyle. So I think we have to continue to dig in deeper, because I'm so happy, Dr. Brewster, that you're doing your master's degree in public health. Because in my mind, we have these conversations are wonderful and great and educational, but the actual work has to be done on the ground, so that we are holding educational programs. We're talking about the culture, which can impede many of our locals in terms of adhering to their routines, taking their medications. We also have to talk about how do you adapt to a new lifestyle. So I coach a lot on the importance of accepting failure, of not seeing failure as a stop, but seeing failure as a taking a different direction. So how do we encourage people to say, well, you know what, I didn't do particularly well this week with my lifestyle. Maybe I consumed too much processed food this week, but maybe I can do better this week. Instead of saying, you know what, this is not working for me, so I'm just going to go back to my old lifestyle of drinking my soda and eating my processed food. But before we wind down this evening, I also want us to talk about a very crucial situation we're facing, not only in Dominica, but in the world in general. And that is the crisis of men. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to bring the two of you here as role models of men who came from humble beginnings, and I fall into that category as well, coming from a background where you had little to no resources and forging a way, figuring it out, refusing to stop at no to create that direction that you wanted to go. And we talked about the importance of support. We talked about the importance that none of us do this alone, but you have to seek the support. We talked about the importance of mentorship. And just as important, Dr. Vidal mentioned the importance of making people want to invest in you. Because when I think of my own experiences wanting to advise young people in Dominica in terms of pursuing their studies, and simply, for example, saying, well, look into Midwestern State University and find out how you can potentially get into that college. And they simply don't follow up. Now, am I incentivized to continue to invest in you? No, I'm not. Because it's showing me that you're not willing to take the first step. So let me just hear your views on what we are seeing in Dominica and also beyond Dominica in terms of that crisis of men, the feeling that men are now feeling worthless. They are not feeling motivated. And I happened to catch a very important program recently. And what we are hearing is because there's a shift in skill sets. So where we have seen back in the past where men were valued for their physical strength, and many of the jobs that they worked involved physical strength, we're now seeing a move towards the knowledge industry, where physical strength is not of less importance, but the focus is now more on intelligence, the knowledge industries. So I want to get your views on that, because in my mind, it is very frightening. For example, as an associate professor, and I say this all the time, I've been teaching for 15 years, and I'm always counting the men in my classroom. And when I have 5 men in my classroom, I get excited, because that is telling me that more men are now pursuing higher education. When we look at the statistics and we see numbers like the number of men who are currently pursuing higher education is the same as the percentage of men who pursued higher education in the 80s. And these are not statistics I'm making up. This is actually research-based evidence. So what are your thoughts? What is going on when we think about the crisis of men in society?
Can go ahead, Dr. Bill. I'll take it after.
So that's interesting. I think there are a few things happening. One, we have to recognize that women are more empowered, and there are more resources available. The 1950s woman was more suffocated and didn't have the available resources that she had, and so now she is going to college and doing all those things more. So you see them at higher percentages. So that's one part of it. The issue with men, I think, it's really broad, and it's very difficult to put your finger on what exactly is happening and what exactly is the issue. Because I feel when I look at the men that I associate with, look at Dr. Brewster, for example. They are motivated people. I think we have in Dominica and even in the United States, for example, with social media, with the thought that you can make easy money some way, somehow, the thought that somehow school is not as important, then things have to change. It's very difficult for me. The question is, do I truly believe there is an issue with men as general? I don't necessarily. I think there's a segment of the population that are not motivated. I don't necessarily think it is along sex, because there are females also for whom there is those issues. And so in Dominica, when I go to Dominica, for example, I see a lot of young men by the side of the road who are somewhat unemployed. And I think what we need to do is go to those men. One of the issues that has happened, especially in my little town of Portsmouth, is a brain drain.
Yep.
My population, when I was in Dominica, we had a lot of adults that I looked up to. When I look back at the people my age group, we all left. All right. So you had my father, my uncles, and then we left in between. And then you have the young kids. And so that level of mentorship, that transition of mentorship really has been lacking. And is that part of the issue? Potentially. I think it's multifaceted, and I don't think I have the answer for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so multifaceted. So thank you for that, Dr. Vidal. But Dr. Brewster, what are the young men, your age group, what are they talking about? Are they talking about pursuing higher education? And it comes back to what we talked about before. It's whom you surround yourself with. So maybe we are not necessarily aware of the gravity of the situation, because the folks that we are surrounded with are all professionals, and they're all making impacts and strides in this world. So we may be a little bit, I don't want to say disconnected, but maybe not as aware of what is going on. But in your generation, Dr. Brewster, what are your thoughts on what is going on with our men in society?
Okay, well, first of all, as Dr. Vidal referenced as well, well, for me, I remember the shock really was not the last time I went to Dominica, but the time before. And I was driving through Portsmouth, and I remember that particular day. It was probably like 11:30, and there was so many guys who were just packed up outside a particular house, just being unproductive. And I suppose the sad part for me is that a lot of them are young men who I went to school with, or we may not have been in the same class, but we were at primary school or high school at the same time. I think the issue is very multifaceted. There are social issues in terms of the perception of young men, and what is manly versus what is stereotypically for a female. And I mean, personally, and I don't speak about that very often, but as someone who I suppose from very early I chose a path of relative decency, and commitment to my academics, and so forth. As a young man, although I had a lot of support, from people at church and family and so forth, in certain circles, I didn't feel like my academic prowess was a strength, because it was looked down at, because I'm boring, I'm not a gallus, or anything, and those things can be very discouraging. And the truth of the matter is that I believe a lot has to do with the environment that we're in, but I feel a lot more has to do with what we're made of, innately. And it goes back to parenting. I think we have to strengthen our parenting. We're living in a time where we're having younger parents, children making children, and unable to pass on the kind of values that would motivate these children to become productive members of society. To this day, and forevermore, I'll be grateful for the foundation that my parents set for me, that put me on the path that I am. But then there's also issues in our education system where you have persons who are more inclined to technical subjects, but we are essentially forcing students to be square pegs in round holes. And we know statistically that young men are oftentimes more inclined to the more technical stuff. So there is an unintentional bias But the truth is, the people, my closest friends from high school, three of us are men. One came from a single parent household. One came from a household where one parent, he lived with one parent and another parent was out of the country. And I came from a household where I lived with my both parents who were and still are married. And despite these different disparities along one variable, we are all, on a path of success. Myself as a medical doctor, another one in the army, another one studying engineering. And a big part of it was because we supported each other. We created an environment where we, as young men, are able to be vulnerable around each other, be able to share in each other's joys and in each other's sorrows, share in a manner that is healthy to us as young men, allow us to develop together, that majority of other spaces in our society would not allow because of stereotypes and perceptions that only lead to the destruction of our young men rather than the lifting up of our young men. And so I credit my mentors, but I also credit my peers that I surrounded myself with, for that drive to always succeed. I may not speak to these young men every day, but whenever we do speak, whether it be 6 months after, since the last time, we pick up right where we left off. And it's always productive and about how we can be better for ourselves, better for our families, and better for our country.
Yeah, and you said it very well, Dr. Brewster, because I've been doing these interviews for about 4 years now, and it always comes back to who I surrounded myself with. And I like that you referred to the parents. It begins in the home, because who are you allowing your children to be surrounded by? Are you allowing your children to be surrounded by other parents who wants their children to succeed? Or are you allowing your children to just be surrounded? And it may sound discriminatory, but it is the reality that we have to pick the people we allow to impact our children, because our children are sponges. They're going to soak up everything that is being displayed to them. They're going to soak up the conversations, the attitudes, the mentality. They're going to soak up all these aspects of life. And then we should not be surprised if we're not surrounding them by productive people, that they too grow up to be non-productive. And it weighs on me, because there is some truth to the fact that maybe, one of the concerns in Dominica is that many of the jobs are going to foreigners, and that is a concern. But I still believe that it is innate within us to rise above those challenges, to not be stuck on, and again, going back to the concept of not being stuck at no, not being stuck on the fact, well, I can't get a job in the construction of the airport, but how can I think outside the box? How can I use maybe other skills I might have to create an opportunity for me? So I really want to thank you, Dr. Brewster. I want to thank you, Dr. Vidal. And I believe that this crisis in man conversation, it is the beginning of a very important conversation that I'm hoping to continue, because the reality of it, and going back to that program that I was talking about before, the reality of it is that we're seeing more suicide in men. We're seeing rising rates of suicide in men. So that is one of the reasons I think it has been termed a crisis in men. So that is the beginning of a conversation that hopefully I will continue to have. And of course, you're welcome to join that panel too, but I know you guys are super busy. But I want to come to you for your comments, your final comments. If you want to share any contact information so that folks can get in touch with you, you can do so. But let's just grab some final comments from Facebook. Dr. Vidal, you'll be very happy to know that your sister, my cousin, Brianna Vidal, is on the live, and she says, always so proud of you, bro. Thank you for the information, because I know that you too, you're mentoring her as she goes through the university process. Junie says Dominica should encourage research. Hanika King, good educational program. Let's take people we haven't heard from. Sharon Sinclair, I believe that who they surround themselves with has an impact on their success. Sandra Green, great conversation, Dr. Vidal and Dr. Brewster. So, if we do not take anything out of our conversation this evening, we should take: who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are your children surrounding themselves with if we want to be successful and if we want our children to be successful? So, again, thank you, Dr. Vidal. Thank you, Dr. Brewster. Your final thoughts as we wind down the program. Dr. Brewster, let's start with you.
Okay, so my final thoughts are, first of all, that health is wealth. Health is everybody's business. And the truth of the matter is that no one can love you more than you. And so it is important for each and every one of us to take the matter of our health into our own hands, not depend on any institution, any government, or any other agency to, prioritize your health. There are steps that you can take. You can access information now much easier than ever before. And so it's important for us to ensure that we make use of the avenues to seek information, but to also be mindful that there's a lot of information out there that, in as much as there are in resources that are accurate, they're probably equally just the same amount of, information that is inaccurate. And so it's always important to cross-reference whatever we find on the internet, with healthcare professionals to ensure that we're taking the right steps to take advantage of our healthcare. I think it is important for us to continue to agitate on behalf of the voiceless and to insist on that our policymakers, our lawmakers, our politicians make the necessary take the necessary actions to continue to improve our healthcare system, to create opportunities for expansion, and to increase access to those amongst us who don't have enough access to the healthcare that they need. And the final two things that I would say is that, one, as mentioned before, we cannot overemphasize the importance of, keeping good company and how that has an impact on the trajectory that we take. And one of the things that, is very interesting I think it's been weighing on my mind more during the program than before, is that, the similarity that I think one of the common denominators between Dr. Vidal's and my story is really, the community of friends that we have that we can rely on. And specifically the community of men that we surround us. And it just happens that, we actually talking about, two generations.
Yes.
Because one of the close friends that I refer to is Kadim Douglas, who is the son of Hakeem Douglas, who is in Dr. Vidal's very close circle of positive, conscious men that he relies on as part of his network of brothers. And so we really cannot overemphasize the importance. And the last thing is that, I'm always wary of those who seek to, cast a bad light on those of us who have decided to leave the country to advance ourselves and to seek opportunities. You really cannot blame anyone for seeking opportunities outside. What I will say to those who have left and those who will leave, is that we have a duty to our country, and we must never forget that. Whether it be by taking steps like Dr. Vidal to make knowledge investments and resources available, whether it be that, or for example, for me, I know that I will one day return to Dominica. Because if all of us leave and never return, then we will enjoy everything that there is to enjoy out there, and our country that we claim to love will never progress. And so we need more of us to go back. But as mentioned before, there are a lot of factors that has to be considered, and so the country has to also be prepared to receive those of us who have gone out and exploited all the opportunities and exploit obviously being used in a positive term. All the opportunities to advance ourselves and have the heart and the desire to give back, the desire to help develop our country, but there has to be an environment that is conducive for persons to come back and to give back. And if we cannot do that, then we will never be able to incentivize the return of the brains that have left. to actually help develop the country. I know that I stand ready and willing to do all that I can to help make healthcare better in Dominica because, I have too many people in Dominica that I love.
And let me just add, it is so beautiful to see exactly what we're talking about being embodied right here. One generation impacting the next. And when I put this program together, I had no clue. I knew Greg was from Portsmouth. I did not know that you were from Portsmouth, Dr. Brewster, and I did not know that there was a connection. And how Greg was, Dr. Vidal was able to impact your life. So you're kind of embodying exactly what we are talking about in terms of one generation impacting the other. And again, who you surround yourself with. So congratulations on your success today. We know that you're going to do very important things and you're going to continue to impact not just Jamaica, not just the region, but I can see that you will impact the world. So congratulations and thank you for being here. Dr.
Thank
Vidal,
you.
over to you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so very much for inviting me on this program and sharing this program with Dr. Brewster. Just to piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Brewster is saying, my closest friends when I was 3 and 4, they're still the same friends that I have. Very close network, people that I can talk to and be vulnerable with. And so that's very, very important. I also think that we have to show ourselves to the community. Those of us who are successful, let your light so shine that men can see the good and give glory. And so when we come back and we educate and show our path to success, then it kind of make it easier for people behind you to say, we can do it, and not only climbing up and kicking the ladder behind, but also creating a pathway so that others can come in. From a healthcare perspective, I do think we have to focus on sort of primary care, preventative care, taking your health into your own hands. And I think Dr. Brewster talks about that. Weight, alcohol. This is going rampant in Dominica. I know we like to party, but we also have to figure out what's the impact of that having on our lives. That we eat, but we have to go exercise also. I mean, when we were growing up as kids, we were in school every time, and once we become adults, so that no longer becomes a priority. And so we have to put that back into our day-to-day work and our day-to-day lives in order to have better lives and outcome. And then from a healthcare perspective, again, we as a people, the government has a big role to play in there too, in creating opportunities for people, but we as private citizens also have to take up the mantle to also create that opportunity and make things better for us. Again, I am open, always welcome for anybody to send me any sort of questions. I try to help as much as possible. If you would like to put up my contact information, that is fine. Breast cancer is my area of expertise, but I'm a generalist, both in terms of internal medicine and general oncology, and I'm always willing and able to help.
Yes, I'm putting it right now. So again, it's Gregory A. Vidal at gmail.com. So for everyone listening on the radio, Dr. Vidal's email address is Gregory A. Vidal at gmail.com. Dr. Brewster, you have an email you'd like to share?
It's in the private chat.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll just grab it there. Well, thank you. Yes. So guys, thank you for being here. Again, we want to thank our audience on the radio, our audience on Facebook and YouTube, as well as Sherwin Lambie. Thank you for facilitating this program, Mr. G, for allowing us to be here every second and fourth Wednesday of the month as we continue to harness the power of technology, international radio, social media, and podcasts to leverage the skills, the talents of our experts, our Caribbean and Dominica experts locally in Dominica and around the world as we continue to showcase their work with the view of advancing Dominica and our beautiful Caribbean region. And we would love to hear from you. If you're impacting your world in any particular way, we would love to have you as a guest on the program. So you can always reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com. That is pushpast10@gmail.com. And let me thank everyone who continues to reach out to give us suggestions and ideas for the program. And as Julius Corbett is saying, sorry, I'm late. That's okay, Julius. Remember, you can catch the replay of this program in its entirety if you go on YouTube and you simply type in Q95 FM Radio, Q95 FM Radio on YouTube and Facebook, as well as Push Past 10 on Facebook. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here. This was a wonderful conversation, and I hope it is the beginning of other conversations to have our guests back with us. Given their busy schedules, we'll see how we can have that happen. So again, we talked about the advancements in medicine and the implications for Dominica and the Caribbean region, among other topics. And we had with us Dr. Gregory A. Vidal, as well as Dr. D. Malcolm Brewster. So I am Simone Matthew. It is always wonderful to be in your company. We will be back with you, let's see, 2 weeks from now, November, I believe, 27th. And this time we're going to engage our youth. So we're going to have with us the Dominica Young Entrepreneurs Club. So we are going to engage with our youth because we talk about them all the time, but it is important to engage with them to hear what's on their mind and their plans for their future. So I look forward to being in your company. So until then, you have yourself a wonderful evening. Good night, gentlemen. Say bye to the audience. Thank you, Lambi.
Yes.
Sorry for keeping you late. Take care.
Good night to you. Good night to you, and good night to all the listeners.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye, Dr. Brewster.
All right.